were billeted and the officers' club was located. The local baker contracted to bake our bread, and frequently local families invited us into their homes for a home-cooked meal. The children in Saint Andre were very friendly, and we sort of adopted them, and we became very attached to them. It was Christmas. It was the Battle of the Bulge. During the Battle of the Bulge, we played an important role in bringing up reserves and supplies. Part of the 17th Airborne Division was brought to Liège, Belgium. On one of our missions to Liège, a V-1 unmanned bomber bombed a school building that had been converted into a hospital. The bomb destroyed the section where German wounded prisoners of war were being treated. Of course, the German POWs were killed, as well as the American doctors and orderlies in that section. Our mission that day was to airlift paratroopers, and on our return trip to evacuate the wounded from this makeshift hospital. The only way we could tell if the airstrip was still in Allied hand was to circle the strip twice. If we did not encounter ground fire, we assumed that it was safe to land. A Christmas dinner was prepared for us in Saint Andre. Tord Ringdahl was the head of a committee for the arrangements and procurement of the food for this Christmas dinner, served to us after a combat mission to Bastogne and Liège, Belgium, during the Battle of the Bulge in 1944. On March 4, 1945, we flew a parachute resupply to the FFI, or Force Française de l'Intérieur, the French underground in the Alps near Bonneval, France. On March 22, 1945, the 306 Troop Carrier Squadron took part in a glider pickup in the evacuation of wounded soldiers from the Remagen bridgehead, which was accomplished east of the Rhine River. 2 poles were used to support a tow rope between them, about 10 feet above the ground. A white marker was stretched under the tow rope between the 2 poles to act as a target for the pickup plane. A large reel filled with nylon rope was bolted inside the airplane, with the rope threaded through a grommet at the bottom of the plane, then attached to a long rod hinged to the plane. A treble hook was attached to the end of the rope. The reel was equipped with a brake similar to that of a fishing reel, which gradually braked the spinning drum. I don't know the amount of pull there was on the rope, but I do know that the plane shuddered and almost stalled as it picked up the glider. A string attached to the cockpit and the tail end of the plane showed some stretch in the plane itself. And finally, success. The glider, filled with wounded soldiers, were airlifted by the pickup method. To the best of my knowledge, this operation was attempted only once. Early in 1945, Allied troops were advancing to the Rhine. Crossing was made possible by the capture of the Remagen Bridge, followed by the 3rd U.S. Army crossing in the Oppenheim area. In the Wesel area, a Rhine crossing was combined with an aerial paradrop. On March 24, 1945, 1,625 aircraft and 1,384 gliders were deployed, a grand total of 23,341 airborne troops, 4,780,000 pounds of supplies, 1,096 vehicles, 454 artillery weapons, and 390 gallons of gasoline were dropped. 92 aircraft and 714 crew members were lost on this mission. Our move to Metz on the Moselle River occurred in April 1945. We stayed in a cavalry horse barn, not by any means a chateau, but a brick building, rather nice. There were plenty of underground fortifications there, too. Mess hall lines kept getting longer and longer, and the cooks did not do dishes. During the final phase of the war in Europe, our primary mission was to fly gasoline and other critical supplies to the ground forces which were driving deep into Germany. Forward landing fields were often cow pastures within range of enemy lines. The group ferried 15,068,036 pounds of supplies in March, April, and May. Air evacuations were made on the return trips, often flying all the way to Northern Ireland with the wounded. We airlifted all seriously wounded soldiers, regardless of their nationality, German prisoners of war included. Flight nurses did a great job in treating and calming the wounded passengers and assisting the crew in keeping them strapped in their bunks during flight. VE Day on May 8 was followed by a significant change in the history of the outfit. On May 15th, it was learned that we would remain in Europe as part of the occupation forces, eventually moving to Munich, Germany. Our work after VE Day was mainly to ferry displaced persons, Allied prisoners of war, and redeployment personnel. 45,525 passengers in these categories were airlifted by aircraft of the group. It was in Africa in 1943 that I talked to a German prisoner of war who had been to the Russian front. Here's what he told me about those brave Russian soldiers. Quote, "They were like the wild Indians in your cowboy movies. They would charge, and apparently the bullets could not stop all of them. During the many reunions of the 306 Troop Carrier Squadron, an effort was made to identify the power pilots shown in this picture. I'll show close-ups and name them if I can. Apologies to anyone who may be identified wrong. From left to right are C.D. Bach and Rufus Y. Norris. Left to right are Stan Seifert and Jack Blackman. The pilot on the left is unknown to me, then Pete Glittman. Sam Bailey and the other pilot on the right is unknown to me. Neil Cook, Jack Naylor, and last on the right is probably Arthur Pate. On the left is probably Carl Leitner. On his right is Charles Bachtel. I was not able to identify the other two pilots on the right of Bachtel. Judson W. Pittum, John Bolt, and John Montgomery. Lieutenant Quinn, whose first name is unknown. I'm also missing his first name for Lieutenant Hodge on the right. John K. Barber, William J. McCormick, Thomas Mills, Robert E. Veach, and Mosier, whose first name I don't recall. K.F. Stetson, John Coakley, Thomas Ezel, and John Bolt. I was not able to identify the pilot on the left. Next is J.D. Bart, who is followed by another unidentified pilot. Next is John Bray, and last on the right is H.H. Sibley. Here is a list of power pilots not shown in the power pilot picture. Logan C. Atterbury, Lieutenant Ayres, Howard Baker, Leonard Bowers, William Clay, John Corsetti, George Evans, Cornell Houston, Ed Hunter, Billy Imboden, Michael J. Kelly Jr., Douglas Lippy, Hector Maffia, Buckley Maynard, James Myers, Wilburn McNutt, Royal S. Thompson, Lieutenant White, William Wright, Earl Zimmerman, and Lieutenant Zumhagen. Thanks to the ones who have contributed to the identification of the glider pilots shown here. It was not an easy task. Close-ups of the picture will be shown and the glider pilots identified if known. Again, apologies to anyone who may be identified wrong. Left to right, front row, Paul F. McWilliams. Back row, Bob Romick, Arthur J. Wisniewski, and Dale Clover. Front row, Thomas F. Fernandez and Dulty Red Smith. Back row, Nickel, whose first name I don't recall, then Neil J. McKnight and Donald R. Fox. Front row, Joe Krisak, Herbert Bolam, and William Ossick. Back row, L. Brooks, Gladwin Ellis, and Robert Smith. Front row, James Mell, Wolfram Itner, Carson E. Crabtree, and James G. Shelton. Back row, Jack Lockhart, Jack Dam, and the last one is unknown to me. Front row, John Fox, Louis W. Engstrom, Frank L. Vance, and Gerald E. Shields. Back row, Orville Vaughn. I've forgotten the name of the next one. Then Cuthbert Joyner and George Anderson. Front row, Shelton Reimer, Griffin, whose first name I've forgotten. Next, I don't recall his name, and then Henry Yates. Back row, William P. Boganis, L. J. Dawson, and Ray Ballinger. Not in the previous pictures are Paul M. Berry, Harry J. Getney, Jim Gifford, Walter E. Lapisa, Noel C. McCann, William McMahon, Maurice H. Perkins, Tord M. Ringdahl, Irvin P. Slattery, and H. H. Stout.